Hello. Hi. How is everybody? How are we doing? Good to see you. Hi.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully, everyone's done voting, and if you haven't voted, go vote now, and then come back and watch.
Turn off the live and go vote.
I voted.
Me too. Yeah.
I did early voting, so my sticker was thrown out like a week ago.
We never throw anything away here. It's a matter of finding.
Where did it go? Before we get started with the topic and all of that, just a friendly reminder to go ahead and like and hit that subscribe button. If you want, even hit that alert button so that way you know when we go live. You get those alerts from us, and you can join us and join in the conversation. But most importantly, please hit that subscribe button and follow, like, all of that good stuff. You can also join in the conversation, like I said a second ago. We are monitoring the chat. We do love to hear from you. So please feel free to give us your thoughts, questions, whatever you have as we discuss our topic. All right, who's up?
Yeah, so last week we were finishing up Scary 101 for October, and we're over doing scary stuff, and we're over doing the 101 stuff too. I feel like we want to be a little more freeform these next few lives, so we're just going off a topic that Brooke chose, which is why bad advice feels so good. And why sometimes following bad advice feels good sometimes as well. Why do we follow bad advice, even if it
I don't know,
sounds
but I
like
like
bad?
this sometimes the the use of
Sometimes.
two sometimes is.
Yeah, I don't follow bad advice, but I know other people do.
Of course not.
What do you think other people follow that's bad advice? Like, give me an example.
So I'm gonna just go off of like it's advice. I think it does fall under the definition of advice, but it's more of like those like worn out sayings that people just say just to either sound like they're helping or
There's a
just
lot
to
of
fill
them.
up space. Like
everything happens for a reason, Anthony. Everything happens for a reason.
I hate that saying. I hate it.
You know you never get more than you can handle.
Yes.
Although that's not really a piece of advice. That usually like preempts a piece of advice where it's like, well, everything happens for a reason. You just have to, you have to forgive yourself first before you can forgive others, or something like that, or fake it till you make it. I think I've said that as a piece of advice before.
Which is funny because fake it till you make it falls into our rhyming category as well. Like, I don't know if you guys read that article about how if it rhymes, like it automatically becomes advice
it sounds
people
good.
think of more often. Like beer before liquor, never been sicker. Liquor before beer, you're in the clear. I've had both situations, and I have had the same result depending. Which is feeling horrible and sometimes feeling surprisingly good and not knowing. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. But those rhyming ones tend to stick with us, which is funny because, just because something rhymes doesn't make it good advice.
Yeah. Platitude. That's the word I was thinking of. It's just a platitude that just sounds nice because it fills up space. Another one I'm reading. You have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. That's not true. Stop making me try to love myself. I can love whoever I want. And hate whoever I want. But other than that, like advice that's specifically like for guidance, like I'm telling you a recommendation of a course of action is what I think advice is. And advice is like a-holes. Everyone's got one.
Well, And everyone loves their own the most. Like,
I did not. I have not heard that follow up to that saying. That's a good one.
That's one of the things we say in our course. It's not that specifically, but the only thing people like better than a good idea is their own idea. Um, uh, but sort of a similar situation in the sense that people tend to love to give advice more than they enjoy taking it a lot of the time. But some of us do enjoy taking advice. I know there are times I certainly do.
Or look towards advice. Like when somebody's looking to figure something out or ask a question, like they're not really looking to figure out like what's the best way I should go about it, or how should I find the best strategy to go about it. Like some people just want straight up, just tell me the answer. I don't want to go through these hoops of self-discovery or research or critical thinking. Just give me the answer as fast as you can. I need advice. Like today, Brooke, you were looking at those tables. You just wanted me to tell you which tables
Yeah,
to buy.
yeah. But then when you told me, you may have told me, and I got like I asked other people, and I've been like polling everybody. But ultimately, I'm going to be the one to make the decision. Like ultimately, it's going to come down to me
No.
deciding, but I'm just collecting data before I make the decision.
Advice.
I have a friend who asked me for advice just so she can go the opposite direction, whatever my answer is. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Did she preempt this? Like, Jerome, you're always wrong. Can you give me some advice? What
In her space, we think very differently. So I think that's why she does that. We think, and that's why we kind of get along, is because we have opposite perspective. But when it comes to her life, obviously she wants to pick what fits her best. So she'll ask me my advice on a situation in her life, and she'll pick the opposite of it usually.
So I mean, what's interesting, I think, what it does for me, because there are often times where I will be asking advice, and then somebody will give it to me, and I will have a reaction to it, where I'll be like, "Oh no." Like, you know what I mean? Like, that is not what I want to do. Like, that is not, and I get this sort of, but so by asking the advice, I may not take it but it definitely will provide some clarity to me. Like, it will like, oh, okay, well, that's definitely not what I want to do. Like, you know what I mean? And I think by having that discussion sort of about it, it allows me to have a little bit of clarity and thought process. Okay, that's not the path. I'm narrowing the field, right? I'm narrowing the options down, which is interesting and fun. In this space, though, one of the things we're talking about, actually, I think we've gone into this, and I just want to preface this very importantly with coaches don't give advice.
A lot of people come into the classes expecting that we're going to co-sign their opinions and their advice giving, and then when we tell them, "Oh no, you don't do that," some of them are not happy about that because they have such attachment to their own advice.
Yes, they have attachment to being able to provide solutions and provide them in a way that is, very specific. I would say they want to provide specific solutions that they have come up with, essentially. And they want to be, I guess, it almost feels like an ego thing where they want to be the smartest person in the room, right? The person with all the answers. That's a very stressful place to be. I don't willingly want to be that person.
Yeah. Or another title that they will want to move towards is be the guru, be the one with the answers, and have everybody look to them to be the center of attention.
At that point, I feel like they're narcissists. I'm sorry. At least there's some narcissism going on there. If that's
once you call yourself a guru, you've taken the step to elevate yourself to like a spiritual level, and then it's just like now you're beyond,
Yeah, those are big red flags for me right there.
You're beyond. You've put yourself beyond criticism at that point. Because how dare you?
Let's talk a moment about. I mean, we preface this all with that coaches don't give advice, but we have to be prepared for the fact that clients are going to come in and want advice, right? And I will say, all of the people who take our courses would love, I mean, a lot of them leave hoping, we're going to give them all the advice in the world to become the next Tony Robbins, but there's a lot of learning and stuff that has to happen between here and there and all these things. Or, Brene Brown, insert big person. And they think that, okay, I'm going to be done with this course and there's going to be some magical advice that I'm going to receive that is going to solve all my problems. And that's not the case. And you'll have clients do the same thing where they're going to come in, tell me what to do. And I've certainly had this experience. Like, I just want you to tell me what to do. So with that in mind and thinking about that, why is it we seek advice? What is it in us that causes us to rely on the advice of others instead of our own discovery and learning? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, if I'm taking someone's advice, I'm essentially relinquishing responsibility of the result. So if it doesn't work or it doesn't produce the outcome that I was told, it's that person's fault. It's not my fault. So for me, when I'm taking advice, I'm sometimes, excusing myself of responsibility. And sometimes I like to do that, but often I don't like to do that. I would prefer to screw up or do something wrong or learn the hard way rather than take bad advice potentially.
Is that a conscious choice? So like, is that something we consciously think that we want to do this in order to not have to have responsibility? Do you think that people think that far in advance? Or
no, I don't think it's conscious most of the time. I mean, for me, it can be now, but for most of my life, it was not. I see this a lot with, people in my family who just want to listen to their doctor, and I'll give them a few things to maybe explore, and they'll say, okay, I'll talk to my doctor about it. It has to come from this authority figure, and it has to be their advice in order for the person to want to explore it. And I can't break that through. It's just kind of like programmed, as that's just the way it is. Part of it to me looks like, yeah, a subconscious, evading of responsibility, because, well, the doctor didn't tell me to do that. How would I know to do that? Well, I mean,
all I'm thinking is
no.
like, man, you would have you got to really trust your doctor if you have to go to your doctor.
Yeah, your doctor needs to be essentially God and know everything. Because, yeah.
Whoever that person is has not had doctors disappoint them, because I certainly have. Where I've just been like, what just happened? Like, when I had that realization that doctors are just human and they get tired and bored,
or when they're like, let me go research this, and they go outside the room and just look up on Google your symptoms.
No, I full blown had that. I mean, that was because I had a rare condition, and when I had a rare condition, I went to my rheumatoid arthritis doctor, the rheumatologist, the first time, and he was like, "Oh, I've never heard of that. I will be back," essentially. And he literally went to his computer, looked up information. We had a short discussion, and then he said, "Can you come back in 2 weeks? I'm going to do more research as well before I decide what we're going to do." And so I've absolutely had that happen. And it's interesting. And it's interesting how often there's just so many different perspectives, and you have to realize that, and this is the scope of knowing that one person has is going to be in their scope of knowing. So there may be things that they do not know. There may be things that they do not address. They might be focused on one thing. Maybe they've had a lot of success with helping people in one place, and so that's where they put the bulk of their focus. And this can be applied to being doctors or anything, but they might be leaving a lot of other things out in that process because of that. So it's an interesting space to rely on somebody for one person for their sole knowledge, and have that help guide you in one direction or the other.
And the same can be said for coaches. Take a business coach. I mean, that person is coming from, like you said, a very specific scope of knowledge. And so, what their directive is may or may not work for you. You may not even be willing that may not even be what they say you should do, may not even be aligned with your values or who you are. And I think, yeah, I really do. I think it's subconsciously kind of evading responsibility because then, well, my business coach told me to cold DM 15 people a day. So, I didn't have to use my brain. I just listened to the advice and it didn't work.
Well,
So it's not my problem.
that's the other thing though that happens with that, right? I mean, I think it can go two ways where you have the person that does all the work but they don't see the results and now they have somebody to blame. But then
Right.
there's also the person who maybe doesn't do 15 but does 8, and doesn't see the results, but then blames himself.
Yeah.
And now because that coach told them to do
Mhm.
one, or so and so told them to do one thing, they're like, well, it's really my fault, I didn't get the results. But you don't know if you would have, that or not, like that. Who's to say if the who's
I
to
think
say, period.
that gets
Not
into
everything
another
will work
issue
for
where like
everybody.
the outcome of the advice is completely independent on whether the advice is good advice or bad advice. Because
Tell me
it,
about it.
it might be good advice to cold call 15 people. If that's like, if my business model, maybe not coaching, but if my business model, most of the businesses that are related to me, they rely on cold call sales, and I just don't really want to take that step because I'm uncomfortable with talking to people. It might be good advice to call 15 people, but the results might be it doesn't work because it's
Well,
purely a numbers game. But I'm just saying the inverse could be true. It could be bad advice, and I take the advice and it somehow leads to a good result. Not understanding the connection between why the advice does or doesn't work and then what the results are, they seem independent to me.
so it's
Uh,
funny because there's so many, like, if I mean, Anthony, if you look at these things, this idea of giving advice, and we sort of take this and we put it in the container of like scientific method, right?
mhm.
So if we take advice giving and we approach it like a science experiment, as it were, you have to go into it and rule out all of so many factors so that you can hopefully be testing for a single thing, right? So if you were going to tell me, well, if we put that model to cold calling 15 people, right? Well, there's so many pieces. We can say it works or doesn't work, but what are we not thinking of when we say go cold call 15 people? What is the script? Who are the people? Where did you get the list? How are you on the phone? How are you at selling? What are you telling them? What is the offer you're making? What time of day are you calling people? Because if you're calling people at 10 p.m. or 10 a.m., you're going to have two very different results. Like there are all of these elements that I can easily say go call 15 people, but when you don't think about all of the other pieces that could affect the results of that, um, and affect the outcomes, if you're calling them on a day that you crashed your car, you lost your dog, and you're probably going to be in a totally different
Mhm.
selling space than you would if you were in a good space. There's so many things that you can blame or not blame,
Mhm.
um, or look at or not look at. And so it's really hard. I think your point is very valid that the advice can be good and you can have a bad outcome. The advice can be bad and you can have a good outcome because there are so many other factors we have to consider.
Also, even defining the outcome as well, because if my outcome was to make a sale, then it might be bad advice. But if my outcome was to get comfortable making cold calls and get comfortable with people saying no to me, then maybe making those cold calls
In
was
that
good
case,
advice and it achieved the
call
goal.
people at 9 p.m. on Sunday.
Yeah, then if you want no's, do that.
Or 9 a.m. Either way.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to measure the results, or sorry, it's very difficult to assign value to advice only based off of just the results that you get.
Yes.
Another dumb example would be like my advice would be to go buy a lottery ticket. Well, most of the time that's going to be bad advice, except for the 1 in a billion person who wins the lottery, and they're going to probably say it was good advice, although it's probably still not good advice either way. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into what would actually qualify as good or bad advice.
So coming back to this question of why do we ask for advice? Because we're logical human beings. We know there are all these other things. So Jen gave us one reason, but we didn't get any other reasons. Like, what is it in us that seeks advice? We've already talked about being able to relinquish responsibility, and just, I know sometimes I will ask for it, one, for clarity, to see what other people would do. I like to like poll, like, get a lot of different perspectives, and then that will inform my decision. And then it's also a little that I guess I just want to see what other people might do. Maybe they something comes up from that. But what else? What other reasons do we seek advice? Oh, the other reason I do is, for me, is like, sometimes I just don't want to think. I'm just like, sometimes it feels like so overwhelming and so much work to have to figure it all out by myself, that asking somebody else what to do makes it feel like it just feels like help, it does. But that's a little scary when you think about it, but we'll talk about why that might be in a minute. It's scary.
I got another one: to co-sign my own BS.
That's a good one.
I
That is
have
a good
known
one.
plenty of people, and I've probably done it myself, but I've known plenty of people who ask for advice, already knowing what the advice
yeah.
giver is going to say, and is going to validate whatever opinion I already have.
1,000%.
And I'm dressing it up as I'm looking for advice, but I know what my friends are going to tell me. I know what my family's going to tell me, and it's probably not going to be really useful. It's just going to solidify.
An echo chamber. Like, that's an echo chamber, right? We're going to go to the echo chamber when we want somebody to just affirm something we already have, and not to make our life any more, not to introduce an alternate opinion or create. A good example, like a way to think of that essentially, is like, if you have, if we take this to, like, let's say you have a crunchy granola friend that does not believe in, Western medicine, right? And then this about them. I mean, you have that friend. We have that friend. We know that person. We know the advice they're probably going to give if I go and ask them about the fact that my stomach has been hurting for 3 weeks. Okay, and what do you think I should do? That person is going to give you one piece of advice, and you know what it's going to be. It's not going to be go to the doctor. Okay. Now, you've got the other person on the other end that is probably very in the medical, big Eastern medicine person only, or Western medicine person only. That's what they're going to. Jen's friend that's going to get all the advice from her doctor. We know what that person's going to say. So if I have already subconsciously made my mind up that I'm leaning towards the doctor side of things, or maybe I don't have the money right now to go to the doctor, so I'm leaning towards the crunchy granola side of things, I'm going to choose who I ask what to do, and their advice that they give me is going to weight a lot differently than depending on what I really want to do ultimately, right? So very, very, very good point, Anthony. Any other reasons you think? Thoughts? I have one.
Oh, Jerome.
I was just going to say, I mean, I can just reiterate pretty much the opposite of what Anthony said. What my friend does is just for perspective, just to have maybe someone else's opinion, not necessarily to take that advice, but just to put something out, kind of use it as like a sounding board, so that way you can eventually formulate your own advice that you do end up moving forward with.
It's funny, there was a meme I saw the other day about don't get advice from anybody who isn't where you want to be. So, like, just, you can interpret that as you will, but that sort of brings me to my point where I might ask somebody advice because I genuinely respect, admire, really, look up to. I look at them and I think this person knows their shit, right? They have been able to do this. They have been successful at this. They
They have
always
skin in the game.
Good and sound advice, right? So that might be somebody that I go to because I genuinely go, okay, they know what they're talking about. Like if I think of like professors, right? Somebody who is a professor, somebody, if I was in school and I went through an existential crisis in college, in college, like about 19 years old. And I was taking a course called What is the Meaning of Life? And in this existential crisis, I started talking to anybody who was like high up in in several different kinds of churches and religions, essentially, just like picking their brain. And why did I do that? Because I felt like, well, heck, they know a whole lot more about religion and spirituality and self and all of these things than I do probably. So let's go talk to these people and learn from these people. And it was because I genuinely respected what they had dedicated their life and time to, and wanted to know more, and was hoping it would provide me with some knowing. I don't know that it did. It was actually, it was a crazy thing my mom told me while I was freaking out that like settled me down. So.
I think I can't imagine that it didn't, or at least become an educational foundation to build on the next whatever direction you were going toward. So yeah, I would imagine.
It was neat to see, but I think if I was more mature, I would have respected it better, which is funny, because at the time, and being at the time much more of a staunch sort of atheist type, and like having felt like I was hurt by religions, essentially, where I had experiences with people who were very religious that were very hurtful to me. And so I think I went in not as open as I should have been, essentially. And because of that, there was something about their expertise that also tainted their advice, where I was like, well, you've drank the Kool-Aid. So it was kind of like a weird space to be in, where I was hoping there would be some great answer there, but it was always torn between that and my own cynicism, essentially. So it was, again, but another reason to get advice, because there are people who we genuinely think will have a great answer for us. But may not be the case. Anthony, you said something about skin in the game. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, yeah. What you were talking about is the idea of having skin in the game. I go on, an example of this in real life is I frequently go on forums about stocks and trading and options and things like that. Mostly for entertainment. I don't really take the advice that's on there. I take it with a real big grain of salt. But when people do give advice, like not real legitimate financial advice, but advice about a certain stock or a strategy in regards to trading stocks, they'll say X, Y, and Z stock is doing really good, you should invest in it. And then everybody in the comments will be like, okay, show us your positions. Show us that you are putting your money where your mouth is.
That's a big thing.
You've got skin in the game and you are actually taking your own advice, because if they don't do that, it's not worth cracking. No one's going to, put any stock in what you are saying. But the people who say crazy stuff, and it might be really bad advice, but at the very least, they show a screenshot. They've got skin in the game. They are willing to lose money on this.
They believe
dumb
their own
idea.
bad advice. I don't know if that makes it better for me, but
It doesn't make it better at all. But it's like, oh, well, let's give this a little bit of consideration, because we at least know this person has good faith and they believe what they are saying to a certain degree, rather than, and we can apply this to things that aren't financially related. If you've got no skin in the game and you are giving advice about something that you have no real attachment to, it's not going to look so good.
Yeah, it's so funny to me, because in this space of advice, like, it blows my mind, and still does often, that Anthony, who is somebody who is very cynical and like, again, like very suspicious, and goes to Reddit for advice all the time.
I don't.
This is not a research source. This is not like, 'cause I have my whole life blown off things like Reddit, because I'm like, what? There's no expertise there. Like, what am I? Why? But
there can be little pockets of it, but you got to really dig through some trash first.
I'll tell you why. And I don't really go for Reddit for advice. I don't ask questions for people specifically unless I'm like trying to work some angle. But it's a good way to source information from a lot of people. And with the upvote, downvote system, you know, all the stuff that people tend to agree with rises to the top. All the people disagree with settles towards the bottom. There are definitely reasons why that is a wrong way of thinking, though, and you shouldn't
Yes.
take that as authority, because just because everyone's on the same bandwagon doesn't make it true.
And it's not everyone either. It's the users
Right.
of
It's the
Reddit that
users
are
of
on
Reddit.
that specific thread that, like, you know what I mean? There's so many.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is it's a good way to source a lot of information very quickly rather than asking one person for a
Okay.
piece of advice.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
And you get to
Totally
see
not-
you get to
totally
see the
not.
arguments unfold, which is why the way that I think I ask for advice, or I tend to satisfy that requirement that people like for advice, is arguing. I like arguing as a sort of sneaky way for me to get advice, because it's like a whetstone where it kind of sharpens my argument, it sharpens my way of thinking and what I kind of want, in the same way that Jerome's friend asks for advice.
I think, though,
But
that
it could,
an unfair way to seek advice, because for somebody, you might have somebody with a tremendous amount of knowledge, and instead of like listening to them and letting them speak it out, you're putting them under stress and in a stressful situation, and you don't know if that person might have a physical
Wait,
reaction to stress.
Why would they
and
be
their brain
stressed?
might shut. Arguing can cause a tremendous amount of stress in people. For me, it triggers a trauma response.
when I don't mean arguing, I don't mean like yelling.
Yeah.
It's more of an argument, like I have an argument A, the other
Right.
person has an argument B, and we disagree. And now I have to figure out, okay, where might I be going wrong, and where can I just like disregard?
I think that as long as everybody can have a disagreement and keep it calm and give everybody the space to speak and have and it's a respectful exchange, then absolutely, let's do it. Otherwise, but so often that isn't the case in those moments. And the moment it is not, I have a trauma response, and my trauma response is just say, shut down and go, you win. Like, it's not going to happen. Very rarely. I mean, it's something where I've had to learn that I'm safe and okay to stand up for myself. Like, that was something that I've had to learn, and still gives me anxiety. To the point that, like, sometimes the way I stand up for myself is having like little like spazzy moments where I'm like, no, stop. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like feels so overwhelming. And so, but I also respect a good argument. I mean, I understand. I respect a good debate. I think I would have been horrible on the debate team in high school. I would have been awful because I would have gotten overwhelmed and just shut down. So,
I feel like Anthony could have been on the debate
oh,
team
he
in
probably
high
would have
school.
been brilliant on it. He probably would have
Mm,
made a lot of people mad.
I knew people who were on the debate team. They were a lot smarter than I was. But yeah, I mean, the advice, what I do to satiate that maybe need to ask for advice is to look for arguments and look for other people arguing as well, like in comment sections or hearing debates. I like listening to debates. Brooke, you probably caught me a few times just listening to people debating on TikTok or YouTube. They're offering a position, which is probably the same as, someone offering advice. Someone is just offering a course of action or a position on a subject. And normally with advice, you only get that person's position. You don't have a third party or someone else saying, well, no, maybe you should consider this, or nah, that's actually not good advice. That's not a good way of thinking. Maybe we go about it this way. The argument is just a nice, easy way to just, listen to both sides and get different opinions that maybe aren't even your own. Which, doesn't really happen when you're just seeking advice from someone. When you're asking for advice in good faith, you're implicitly trusting the person that you're asking advice from. And if you have little trust in people, like with me, then asking advice is not, what you want to do. You want to look for arguments, and you want to look for positions, and
Well, I have major trust issues in certain spaces, like Google Ads. In Google Ads, I'm terrified to take advice from almost anybody because
Even
I
the
just
experts on Google
the
Ads.
experts, because the experts don't have skin in the game. A
Right,
lot of times they
right.
don't. It's not their money that they have to put
No.
up there. Like literally,
Well,
it's
here's
they're
it's
not spending
it's actually
thousands.
it's worse than that, Brooke. It's actually worse than that, and this goes into we can make this a bigger topic about like where you get advice from. Make sure the person you're getting advice doesn't have a financial benefit to the advice that they give you without any sort of
Guarantee.
I guess responsibility or guarantee. So like with the Google Ads people, like the advice they're giving should hopefully from their point of view just keep you buying Google Ads.
Yes.
Advice given from like somebody like a lawyer or a financial advisor, they have a fiduciary responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
They have to ensure that the advice they give you isn't benefiting them in some way, and it's for your benefit only. And they only take like 2% of whatever gains you get. But that's more of a specific topic. You want to make sure that the advice that somebody gives you is not solely benefiting them as well. Advice should probably come from a third party, more objective source of information.
So I want to ask, like, we're having this discussion, it's just interesting, and I'm wondering if this is true for most people, or just because of us, because if we have coaching bias. How do you feel about advice? Like, how do you feel about receiving advice? How do you feel about giving advice?
Okay, who's starting?
I'll start. I feel much better about giving advice. Much better about giving it. Receiving it, I mean, there's times that I want it, and there's other times that I'm sharing to speak out loud. So like I'm saying it to a coach, if you will, to be able to hear myself and say it. Not necessarily am I looking for advice back, or I'm looking to include you in what's going on for me. Again, not necessarily looking for advice. I have done much better on not giving advice, but I can so jump in there rather quickly.
Who's next?
Yeah, Jen.
I do not like unsolicited advice. So just have that be known. Unsolicited advice to me, immediately, it's like I put up a wall. It's just rejected. It's
Like if
"Thank
somebody
you."
like starts a conversation with like, Jen, can I give you some advice?
You should.
I'm triggered just hearing that. No.
Yeah.
No. The
It
answer
feels
is
like
no.
somebody's like trying to force feed me like something I hate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels like somebody's walking up to me with like a bowl of like day old mashed peas that came out of a can that are cold, and they're like, eat. And I'm like,
Well, I mean, like it could also be like when you're a little kid and your parents are like, "Can I give you some cough medicine?" So it's
just
slowly
takes,
pushing
like,
the spoon
yep.
towards you.
Now, advice that I seek out, I like, because with my coaching mentality, I'm running it through my own filter. I'm not taking it as fact or truth. I'm going to probably verify it with another source. I'm gonna figure it out. So I do like taking advice. Whatever I do with it, it's not necessarily I act on it, but I definitely like receiving advice that I explicitly ask for. As far as giving advice, I don't really like to give advice. Again, this has to do with, a coach mindset. I would much prefer to offer, a new way of thinking or a new possibility that I'm not seeing that person exploring, and then immediately kind of giving it back to them. What do you think about that? Is typically like when I have conversations, I'm not like, oh, you should totally do this. I just don't even talk like that anymore, thanks to being certified.
See, that's kind of the interesting piece, because I don't talk like that anymore either. But I still feel like some of the description you gave about the considerations, have you considered that? That's to me still advice, and that's, is that bad? I think in a coaching session, you're going to taper or tamper, whatever the word I'm trying to say, down that and pull more from the client. And so what could appear as though is advice is really stuff that they've said that I've gathered.
Yeah, and so maybe it's that I do still give advice, but I kind of present it in a way where I'm not attached to whether they take it or not. I'm not attached to it being right or wrong.
Agreed.
I'm
Yeah.
just putting it out there and then seeing if it resonates or lands for them at all. If it does, great. If it doesn't, great. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think, and I'm not saying this as I like it, but I think I don't like taking advice, and I think even as a kid, I've never really liked
I'll just say
taking
he
advice from
hates taking advice. Like it's not like it's impossible. There's no way I can tell. I just have to accept that he will.
We had something that happened today when I asked you about the kimchi or the stupid sauerkraut, and you're like, you're actually thinking about your gut
I was
health?
very excited to hear about him thinking about probiotics and prebiotics and how it affects his stomach. Mind you, this is something I have been talking about gut health for how long now?
Yes,
So like, but I
yes,
just
and
know
you
it.
would absolutely
was,
love to give that advice to me, but I gotta take things at my own pace.
So that'll tell you right there how I mean, I'm a bossy person. Well, and that's the thing. Like I grew up, I was bossing adults around as a kid. That's just who I was. Like, right? I was like, go here, do like, it's just like I was known to be just a bossy little girl. And that grew up in me. And I've had to learn to be less bossy, less, advice giving. And I definitely think I am now. But I think what I do is I throw it out there, but I also throw it out there knowing full well that everybody's just going to do whatever they want at the end of the day. Like I can talk all day long, and at the end of the day, everybody's just going to do whatever they want, and I'm that's fine, and I'm okay with that. So,
but on the opposite end of the spectrum for me, as much as I hate taking advice, I think about mostly my friends and my family. I think I like giving
You
advice.
have friends?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're more of like my coworkers, but in a leisure sort of setting. I think I do like giving advice from what I can recall about like times where that comes up.
Sometimes there were times where it's been like, I'm like, that's dangerous, Anthony, just to be throwing out advice like that specific. What are you doing? Like,
yeah, and I do find it a little bit funny at times too. Like I do it a little bit for my own entertainment. But I think the way that has changed since I've started working for this company and understood what coaching is. I think I frame my advice as more coaching related. And if you coach with me, I never give advice. I'm always a stellar 5-star coach. But if you're my friend or you're my family member and you come to me with a question, I'll probably give you some sort of advice on, how to go about it. Maybe not what you should do, but things you probably should consider or think about as you go about whatever it is you're asking for. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I recognize that in me. I should probably take a step back. But I do like giving advice when people ask it of me. I don't think I really give unsolicited advice, though.
Yeah.
you did to me today.
What did I
when
do?
I didn't like it. I rejected it.
Well, how did that work out for you, Jen?
It did not work out.
Yeah. See what happens when you don't take my advice?
But hold on. I don't think your advice would have worked out either, because I did a softer version of your advice and my soft version did not work out. So
I don't know why, because it wasn't specific enough, and I said,
I don't know what they're.
I'm confused.
we're having an argument, and I'm getting energized by the argument. I don't know. So I'm gonna tamp it. I'm gonna take a step back, even though this is my wheelhouse. Jerome, how do you feel about advice, giving and or receiving?
The only person that I don't mind taking advice from that I didn't ask for it from is my mom. She's the only person where, like, even in the moment, I'll be like, "What are you talking about, Mom? I have no idea. This makes no sense." But then 6, 7 years down the line, I'll be like, "That's what she was talking about. I get it. I understand it now." And then it becomes like a lesson learned, and then sometimes really turns into like a model for me to live by. Mom's done that plenty of times, but unsolicited advice, not really my jazz. Not most of the time. Obviously, yeah, if I'm looking for it, I would say Instagram is a space maybe sometimes where I take unsolicited advice. Like if there's someone that I respect that I follow on Instagram Reels, like a fitness guy or something like that, I'll take advice there that is somewhat unsolicited. I
That's
guess
solicited because you
I'm
follow
really
them.
asking for it.
You
Yeah,
follow them.
exactly. So yeah, so I guess yeah, maybe that doesn't count. Giving advice, kind of like Jen. I'm not really here to give anyone advice unless you ask for it overtly. I'll give you my opinion, but I know you probably are in a different. Like, am I giving you advice for a situation that if I were in that situation for me, or am I trying to give you advice based on you, your circumstances, you being in that? I don't know. I couldn't tell you because I'm not in that space. So I can give you my opinion, my just general belief. Again, this is going to be based off of how I am in that moment. But I can't really, I don't think, be too much of a benefit to you unless I'm in your shoes. So again, I'll give my personal beliefs and perspectives, but I'm not a huge unsolicited advice giving guy. I'm just, if you ask for it, I'll do my best. But even then, I'm gonna let you know, hey, honestly, you should take that with a grain of salt because I have no idea what you're going through.
So, I mean, there's, as we, we're coming towards the ending of our live here. So before we sign off, and I accidentally opened the window. There we go. Let's circle into, we mentioned coaches don't give advice, right? And I think through all of this discussion, you might be able to garner and understand and maybe begin to sort of glean why it is that coaches do not give advice. And I think one of the biggest reasons is that different things work for different people. Different things work at different times. Different things, there's all these reasons. So for me, one of the things that comes up is the moment I give advice, I've accepted some form of liability. I have prescribed essentially, and the moment I do that, I can be to blame. I have to be thanked. I have to be, if it works. If it doesn't work, I am blamed. And now we have taken away responsibility from our clients instead of empowering them and making them whole and responsible human beings. And I think that that's a very dangerous thing to do. Why else don't coaches give advice, y'all?
Going back to what I said initially, I think even you're making a very big jump by connecting the results of advice to the actual intent and how good the advice is or isn't. It's coaching is not the space for advising. There's other places where you can, if you want advice, go to a consultant, go get a mentor, go to somebody whose job it is to give advice and show it in a way professionally. How does the advice connect to the results? How can we measure it? How can I take responsibility for the advice that I give and have some skin in the game? Coaching is it's a different sort of thing. It's a different sort of profession and a different way of working with somebody in a partnership where advice does not really fit into the picture. They're just separate things in my mind.
A lot of people will say, that's what I am known for. I have a lot of people come to me for my advice. And we're here telling you advice is not going to be in the best interest of your client. Your client taking control and making decisions is in the best interest of the client. So don't get your self-esteem all wrapped up into that advice that you give, because you have no idea if it's going to work or not work, or what they're coming to you for is support. They want to be able to feel like somebody gets them and hears them, not necessarily advice.
Yeah, and if you just, look at the ICF definition of coaching, you're not meeting the client as an expert or an authority. You're meeting the client as a thought partner, as a thinking partner. And so, the idea that you're meeting the client, you mentioned whole, they're whole and complete as they are. You trust that they are creative, resourceful, and you're literally help bringing that to the surface. And there are very few people in our world, unfortunately, doing that. And that empowerment process is so vital to what the thought partnership is getting that client to tap into themselves rather than to rely on expert advice, guidance, others' opinions, that type of thing. So yeah, I
That's
just go back to the definition of coaching.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, like with piggybacking on to what you said, like that, it creates a hierarchy, right? Like I have the answers, you don't. Like I am better, you are not. You must come to me to know how to do things, and we've created this codependence, and this hierarchy. And when you meet your client where they're at, and they start to come up with the answers, they start to figure it out, they start to do it on their own, they start to and they're gaining independence, they're gaining self-esteem, they're gaining like the the things that you are not working on that they are gaining are much more than what you are probably working on them specifically with, right? Because as they start to learn and grow and figure out they can do it on their own, it's going to fundamentally change who they are and how they approach the world. And that is such a cool gift that comes from coaching. And if you stick with coaching, and mind you, at first the clients might break a little when they find out you're not going to give them advice, and they might fight it a little when they're like, oh my god, I have to come up with these answers on my own, I'm going to just say I don't know, I'm just going to, and there might be some panic, there might be some, but as they work through the process, and this is why it is a process, they're going to learn and grow, and it's going to become more and more powerful to not be giving the advice and to show them that they've got these answers on their own. And it's funny because when you talk about coaching from that, like this perspective, like what you hold space and ask questions and listen and support, like it feels like these very soft skills. And I can see how somebody coming in thinking I'm going to have all the answers is like, there's like, it feels like a hard skill, tangible knowledge, expertise space to be coming from. And when you learn that, no, it's all of these other things combined, but learning how to do that is not as easy as you think it is, because it's breaking all of the habits. It's relearning a way of communicating that doesn't come naturally to most people, and doesn't come naturally to us typically. And so it's just an very interesting set of skills that you have to pick up as coaching, and it's the opposite really of this advice giving, which is so counterintuitive to so many people who are coming into life coaching and thinking that this is what they want to do.
There's so many people that will call in and they'll tell me they're their go-to person, everyone comes to them, and of course I'm not going to like break it to them that will evolve, right? Like that's part of the learning process, and I do think that someone that presents with that is a good space holder in general. So to me, that's like, okay, that's a good quality. This person will likely make a good coach.
Sure.
But in order for them to actually make a good coach, there's a big thing that can make or break it, and that's the ego. And the ego has to be totally shelved in the coaching process. And there are some people that cannot do that. And
we've had people just leave, like, if they can't do it, like if I can't give advice, it's not for me. And I was like, okay, well then this isn't for you. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because you have to shelf that ego and get a new, and I agree, it is a good, people who are coming in with that model of like, I want to give advice, they still want to help people.
It's because they care. They care.
Yes.
Coming into this space to help people. And what do we teach people? A very powerful way to help people. And it may not be what they initially think it is going to be, but how many things in life really are. So they've relearned this whole other skill set, and the advice giving is always there. They can always go back to that, right? That's not going anywhere, right? But
Exactly. They can always go back to that.
instead of teaching you something you already know how to do very well, which is give advice, we are going to teach you how to coach.
But those that have come in and really tried this on for size, and then even just taken it back to their own family, it's life changing. That's what they tell us. It's life changing for them.
Yeah. There's so many people that will say, regardless of whether I use this as a coach, having my own business, it doesn't even matter, because the conversations that I'm able to have with people now are so dramatically different from before I knew how to coach. And that is, I mean, that's like world changing if we can get more people having those type of conversations.
Yeah.
Here's some advice. Take our classes. Take
Yes.
Coaching 101 102. It's not just going to benefit your business, it'll benefit your life.
I mean, I think it says that on our webpage for a reason.
It's not something like that.
It
Something
says
a little
coaching for businesses,
more well
coaching,
spoken.
blah,
Coaching
blah.
for everything.
Coaching for life, and that's what really we mean by that.
My advice: everyone should take our classes. It probably would benefit them. It would certainly benefit us if everyone in the world took our classes. So we've got some skin in the game. I think that should about wrap it up on why bad advice feels so good. Be sure to check us out next time. We don't have a Coaching 101 topic. It'll just be whatever Brooke likes.
It is just chaos this month. I like a little chaos now and again.
Nice.
Don't worry, we will return to 101 in December, but for now, it's just going to be a big surprise each week. 101 will be in December. If for those of you who want to look forward to it, put it on your calendar. We're going to be definitely diving into the space of planning goals, things of that nature as we approach the new year. So that'll be our December topic. But for the month of November, we're just doing all the things that maybe didn't fall under a specific umbrella, and
Nice.
we still want to have a discussion around. So
Otherwise,
All right.
like, subscribe, share, comment.